Thank you. Let's start and then we will continue talking about that. But the short answer to your question about flowering was yes. When in a drought condition, the plant's response is to push flowers. Okay. All right. Let me get my presentation back up from the training and pruning. Okay. Where did this go? All right. Okay. Today, we are going to talk about training and pruning. We will go over the basic concepts of almond tree training and pruning, or the basic concepts of training young trees and pruning the trees in general. Okay. So pruning and training, sometimes we also call is the young tree formation that we refer to here as training. Training means to train the trees to a certain shape. That is basically part of the method of like pruning. Pruning in general is basically cutting off any branches or trimming the tree in any way or shape. So pruning is general pruning. When you prune the tree, you cut the tree. Training is basically when you prune the young tree for the first year, second year, or third year to make a particular shape or form of the tree. Okay, so here are these two definitions. Training can also include tying of the branches, together tying of the canopy, or trellising, and sometimes almond trees are also grown on trellises in some experimental phases. Pruning includes the steps taken early in the life of a tree to establish the desired shape and subsequent maintenance pruning to maintain sustainable production from the tree. So basically pruning includes everything, what the steps that we take early on and the maintenance pruning that we do later on. Okay, but training is only during the first few years. How to prune, the basic terminology that we use in terms of pruning. There are some of the things that when we talk about them, we need to define them first. We have the rootstock below here, we have the root system. Up above the soil line is the graft union. Then we have the trunk. And this area where we have these primary limbs, primary scaffolds arising, that is called the head or the crotch. Then there's a sucker coming out of the roots up into the air. And this canopy of the tree, in terms of training or in terms of tree architecture, we call it a framework. Then these are the primary scaffolds, the limbs arising from the main trunk or from the head. Couple of things that we need to be clear is, the angle of the branch matters. If it's too narrow or if it's too wide, this angle, that can be a weak angle. So you can look at the angles that your primary limbs make with the trunk. And if it's too flat, that's going to be a weak tree. So you call it a weak crotch angle. If it's too narrow, sometimes it's in upright varieties, the angle is too narrow. That is also not desirable. And then we have, from the primaries, we have the secondaries, secondary scaffolds. And then from secondary scaffolds, we have the tertiaries. They're also called, the branches growing outwards would be the lateral branches. So here is a stub. Stub is basically what remains after we cut the limb back to its place of origin. We have about 1 or 1.5 inch of the stem left on the main limb. That is because we want to avoid any infection to be carried to the main framework of the tree. So the stub is kept, and all the branches, when they are thinned, now we'll talk about thinning later, when the branch is cut back to its point of origin, a stub is always left. But we don't leave a long stub, we just leave a short stub. Okay, so before we start talking about how to develop the framework, we need to make sure we are clear on the two kinds of pruning cuts that we make. One is a thinning cut, another one is a heading cut. Okay, thinning cut is when we remove complete branches. So we have a canopy that we have 20 branches arising from the main trunk, and or 15 branches arising from the main trunk, and we only keep 6 of them, and we need to prune rest of them. Okay, just for an example. So we have to take out the complete branches from their point of origin. That is thinning. So a thinning cut is basically making a cut at the base of a branch by removing the whole branch or the whole shoot from its point of origin. A heading cut is basically cutting a branch halfway through or just the tip of the branch, keeping a significant portion of the branch on the tree, just cutting a part of that tree. So if you have 5 branches growing on a scaffold, but you cut all 5 of them a little bit back, maybe keep 18 inches or maybe 40 centimeters, 42 centimeters, and cut the rest of that, that would be a heading cut. So in terms of pruning response, a heading cut and a thinning cut, they have 2 different responses by the tree. A tree will respond totally differently to a thinning cut than in comparison it would have a totally different response to a heading cut. Okay, so this is a thinning cut. This is a picture of doing the thinning cut. See, this is the branch that was growing up here, and this is a branch that was growing on the side, lateral branch. So we cut it back to the point of origin, remove the whole branch. That is basically a thinning cut. Here on the overall framework level, you see these dotted lines. They are the branches that were removed. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 branches removed, and another 6 or 7 branches remained. So in this framework, we only kept 50% of the branches here, right? So all these branches were removed at their point of origin. So this is a thinning cut. We thinned the branches from 15 to 7. Now, a heading cut would be if we tip these branches from the top and then, cut a few inches of growth from the tip. Okay, that would be the next slide. So heading, or we can also call it topping or cutting back. That refers to cutting a branch without completely removing it. Okay, so we will talk about the responses to thinning cut and heading cut in a minute. So heading would be, we just had a portion of the branch, but the bigger portion of the branch is still remaining. In here, we had 3 branches, but all 3 of them we cut from the top. Okay, a few buds from the top, but we kept these branches. So this is a heading cut. Now let's talk about the response to heading cut versus thinning cuts. When you have these branches still, with the tree, you did not remove it from the base, but you only cut it back. Now what you do is you are removing the tip of the shoot. The tip of the shoot has the hormones, particularly the auxins, which actually dominate the growth of the branch at the tip. So what that hormone does is that suppresses the lateral growth. As soon as you remove the tip, that means you are now changing the hormonal balance in the tree. So now, in response to a cut made at the tip, your lateral buds start breaking, and they will start making new shoots. So a general response to a heading cut is that when you make a heading cut, there is extensive lateral growth right below the heading cut. Okay, so the buds below the heading cut will start pushing new shoots. So making heading cuts, you need to be really careful on where you place your heading cut. Sometimes, near the end of a branch, the buds are really closely spaced near the tip of the branch. So you have to make sure that when you are doing heading cuts, particularly when you are, selecting secondary scaffolds, for example, when you're doing long pruning or intermediate pruning, you need to actually make sure you cut off all those closely spaced buds. That's number one, because if you made a heading cut and there is a concentration of so many buds right below the cut that you made, you will have a very vigorous rank vegetative growth from just below the cut from all the lateral buds. Number two, you need to be aware of when you're making a heading cut, which way the bud just below your cut is facing. Okay, so in many cases, especially when we are selecting the framework in the first year or second year, we want to push the canopy outwards, particularly when we have upright cultivars. So we want to push the new growth outwards and then select those branches later on during thinning. So make sure you make a heading cut when selecting that kind of framework, that make sure you select a place to make a cut right above a bud that is facing outwards. So these little things, when you are placing your heading cuts, can actually have a greater impact on the framework of the tree. The response to thinning cuts is basically, we call it local general invigoration of the remaining wood. So what that means is now you removed 50% of the branches. Now, in this case, the other branches were not headed, or the other branches were not, touched in any way. So there is no local effect like sprouting of the lateral buds in each one of them, unless you headed them as well. If you just did the thinning, all the carbohydrates that the tree is going to channel to these branches, now there are fewer branches to use those carbohydrates. So the tree will generally invigorate these branches, meaning that there will be a lot more carbohydrates available because there are less number of branches to feed. So you will see thickening of these branches. Now, the thinning cuts are really important during the first and the second year, because we want to firm up the structure. So I have seen, while I was in Georgia, I have seen a few locations that had high winds. So high wind scenario is a great example of why we would like to have a stronger framework of the tree. Okay, that is number one. Number two, if you leave several branches, several small branches. So number one, they will not thicken. Number two, they are going to create a lot more shading in the subsequent years, okay, inside the canopy. So developing fewer branches and making them bigger and thicker is a good idea for prolonged orchard life. Now, there are scenarios where, I came across a few scenarios where, the growers are investors and they are concerned about getting high yields early on. You can actually manipulate the shape of the tree to give you fruit wood, a lot of fruit wood in the early years when the canopy is still small and there are not serious issues of shading in the early years. The tree would develop a lot of fruiting wood in a scenario where you do lesser thinning cuts, or even if you do very little heading cuts or do long pruning. So pruning, these are the things that you need to strategize when you are actually thinking about the longer term productivity of the tree. Okay, so this is basically in the top. This is thinning cut, the way to cut the limb. This is a limb growing from a major limb. This is a branch. So you are cutting this branch. Now you can cut this branch very close to the trunk like this by leaving no stub, but that is not desirable. Okay, this is because when you make a cut, the wood opens and it is prone to the fungal infection. It can trap moisture from the air, and the fungi can start growing that could infect the main limb as well. So this cut needs at least a few centimeters behind it for the tree to plug the xylem and the phloem, to plug the vascular tissue so that it heals the cut. So this leaving a little stub gives the tree enough room to heal this cut and avoid any infection of the major limbs. Here is a heading cut that you make. So basically this is a bud. So just like I explained that you make any heading cuts in relation to the bud that is placed below it. So the direction of the bud is also important. Like I mentioned, if the bud is to the outside of the framework or towards the inner side of the canopy, but also when you are making the cut, if you are making the cut too close to the bud, now in the same way like above, you run the risk of harming that bud. Okay, so you don't cut too close to the bud. In fact, again, you leave a little space between the bud and the cut so that this can heal properly without harming the bud. Okay, so this is all written what I just explained. These are some practical examples. This is, I think, from peach tree. This is the stub, size of the stub that is left. And this is, this is cut really close. So yeah, these are not desirable. This is a amount of stub that is usually desirable for proper healing. So sometimes we also come across a situation where we have a larger limb to remove. Okay, to remove a larger limb, we make a cut at the bottom first, cut halfway through, and then bring our pruners from the top and then finish the cut. Okay, so let's once again talk about the response to the heading cuts, through pictures. This is a dormant shoot, and we are making a heading cut halfway through this branch, right? So we are keeping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so buds on the branch. So this is a typical heading cut. If we leave it unpruned, if we don't prune it, look at what happens to these buds. They did not grow into shoots because there was a dominant tip of that branch that kept on growing, but still only 2 of these lateral branches started growing. Okay, so that's still natural for the almond tree to grow some lateral branches, even when there is a tip, a live tip, and you did not head it back. So unlike pistachios, almonds are not heavily apically dominant, but the process of apical dominance, which is the apex stays dominant over the lateral buds, the concept still is true in case of almonds, but it is not as heavily apically dominant as pistachios. So you will see some lateral branching, even if you have a dominant apex or tip. So this is the scenario when it was left unpruned. When you pruned, when you headed it, all these buds below that cut, they started sprouting and they gave rise to all these laterals. So in general, what this means is basically local response to that heading cut. Meaning if you do a heading cut, you will have a lot more lateral growth just below the heading cut. Okay, let's take a look at the thinning cut. If you have this main branch and these are the laterals, and these are the cuts that we are planning to do, one here, one there. So basically we are completely removing these branches from their points of origin. In scenario B, we have the unpruned. We did not touch any of this. So the natural growth habit of the tree, all these limbs that we kept, they started making their own lateral branches. But there were so many. So it makes a fuller canopy here. If you made thinning cuts, if you selected fewer branches, then there is some degree of lateral bud response, but not as large a response as in the thinning cut. But these branches are now going to be stronger and firmed up. So the objectives for the tree training, what are our major objectives? The first one is to make the tree strong and to attain the proper structural strength of the tree that can support the maximum crop load in the coming years when the tree gets mature. Then to have a well-distributed crop throughout the tree, we have to aim for a balanced canopy all around the tree in all directions so that the crop load is distributed throughout the tree. And number 3, and that is, I think, one of the most important ones, is to have optimum sunlight exposure throughout the tree. Remember, we are, as I mentioned when I came to Georgia, we are in the business of farming sunlight. So training and pruning is an important tool when we manage the canopy so that we get maximum sunlight within the canopy. So from that angle, training is really important. And then we want to have easy access to all parts of the tree for cultural and harvesting operations. Now, let's just discuss 3 and 4. if we have a crowded canopy, I have seen in so many trees here, if you have a crowded canopy, you can have issues like shading, number one, but also a crowded canopy resists, the penetration of insecticide sprays, for example, or fungicide sprays. Now, when you are doing fungicide sprays at bloom time or during the dormant period, there are no leaves on the tree. As soon as the canopy fills with the leaves, and it's a thicker canopy, and you spray a particular spray application for your pest control, now your spray application cannot get inside the canopy. So you can have issues like diseases like Alternaria, where they like really damp conditions or moist conditions, or you can have pests like scales or mites, deeper inside the canopy. So there are more than one problems that you can face if your canopy is not well exposed or it's not open. Just stepping back, there are some different training systems. Open center and central leader systems are the two conventional training systems that are common. In California, we typically use open center system to train those trees, basically opening the trees like a bowl. But more recently, central leader systems have also been tried. Excuse me. So we will talk about these briefly. But in case of almonds, it's still a lot of experimentation going on. You can use a modification of these two. For example, you can use a modified central leader, for example, modify or head back the central leader at some point in time. Okay. So the open center system is basically the objective is to create a spreading vase-shaped tree, like a bowl-shaped tree that has good light penetration to all parts of the tree. It's open from the top. We do heading of the main branch, main trunk at the nursery, and then we develop the tree sideways from that, and then keep opening the canopy by making a combination of thinning cuts and heading cuts. So this system is widely used for stone fruits, peaches, and others, and almonds as well. The central leader system, in central leader, we train a more upright tree with lateral branches coming out from a central axis. Okay. This training system, some of the people in California or other parts of the world, they now are trying in a high density orchard system where they don't want the trees to grow sideways, but they want the trees to grow more upright, and still being able to shake the trees with the shaker. So far, these systems are successfully used in apples and pears. So we have some examples of almond and walnut central leader systems from California. This is an example of a peach tree, just to illustrate what an open center form looks like. Okay. The open center shape is defined by 3 to 4 main branches called scaffolds. Typically, in case of almonds, we still we still preach 3 to 4, keeping 3 to 4 primary scaffolds. These days, a lot of growers want to keep 5, 6, or even 7 primary branches. That is debatable because there is a lot of concern about long-term security of water or cropping systems. So everybody wants to generate maximum amount of fruit wood early on, and they don't really care what happens to the trees 10 years from now. So with that thing in mind, a lot of people keep more than 5-6 scaffolds. The university research over and over again, it shows that if you keep even 3 strong scaffolds, particularly in a situation where there are other issues like high winds or easy Phytophthora infections, so you want to actually keep 3 limbs which are much more stronger and spaced well to create a longer term framework for the orchard life. Okay, so in the first year, let's first talk about the training during the first couple of years. In the first year, the primary goal is to select the 3 to 5 primary scaffolds. We still go with 3 rather than 5, okay? And we space them out all around the trunk. If you look at this figure, basically this is to show that each branch that arises from the trunk or any parent branch that has a connection all the way to the pith. Okay, so every branch is connected. It's basically like a foundation of a building. So the branch has a connection all the way to the pith that gives it a stronger support to stay on that trunk. So if there are 2 branches really close by to one another, this connection will become weaker. So that is the reason we need to have these 3 or 4 that we select in the first year. We have to have them spaced out all around the trunk. We'll see those examples in pictures in a minute. Okay. So this is what we have in the first year. Typically, this is a short prune tree, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions. I had a lot of observations when I observed the trees in Georgia. So this is the basic structure that we will discuss, and then we'll discuss some modifications to it. So in a normal scenario, you will select 3 to 5 primary scaffolds, well spaced out. This is the canopy looking from the top. This is a 120 degrees angle from the main trunk. And these are the primary scaffolds. They are headed back. This is looks like a short pruning. They are headed back to maybe 12, 14, or 15 inches, severely headed back. And then these are the secondaries arising from the primaries. Okay, so that's the framework that you select in the first dormant season, after the first season after planting. Okay, an important consideration here is, in case of Georgia, you have high wind locations, but the wind direction can be from any side, could be from north side or east side. I have seen the wind patterns in Georgia. In California, in the Central Valley of California, the wind comes from the northwest side towards the southeast side. So we have the major prevailing winds from one side. So we make sure that we keep one of these branches into the wind so that the tree is balanced and it's not pushed to one side by the winds. In Georgian conditions, that means you have to have a well-balanced tree. You have to have these branches spaced out evenly in all directions to make a well-balanced tree. So this is tree with the 3 primary scaffolds, and this is really short pruning. Okay, so you only are keeping like 1 foot of the primary scaffolds. Okay. So vertical angle of that branch is also important. Ideally, it should be 45 degrees from the vertical, from the main branch. The ideal angle should be 45 degrees, the angle that the other branch is making. The branch in the front, that is too flat. It's growing almost laterally, and that is going to be a problem later in the later years when there is heavy crop on the branch. Okay, so you need to be careful of when you're selecting these branches. You have to have a like a in the middle, no narrow angles, even for the upright and laterals. Avoid selecting branches with the oculated bark. Sometimes you will see a ring of an extra additional tissue around the point where your branch is connected to the major limb. So that is what we call as oculated bark, and that makes a weak attachment. Okay, so avoid selecting these branches. So if you see these branches, and if you have enough branches so that you can remove them, thin these branches out. Okay. So this is the first thing that I explained in the previous slides. Try to select the limbs that have vertical spacing up and down the trunk. If this is a trunk.
A big pardon, can you repeat, because your voice was lost and we didn't hear from beginning.
Which part do you want me to?
When you move to the this slide.
Oh, okay, this slide. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So what I was explaining is that what I explained in the previous slides. So you select 3 to 5 primary scaffolds from the main trunk on all sides. We talked about spacing them horizontally on all sides, but you also want to space them vertically, which means that from the topmost scaffold that you kept to the lowermost scaffold that you kept, they have to be vertically spaced. They have to be away from each other at least 3 to 6 inches of space. Okay, so this is what is required. On the right side, I have seen this issue in so many orchards, even in Georgia and here in California. A lot of people basically select these 3 or 4 branches which are arising from the same point, even if they are going towards different directions. They are arising from the same point. That means when I showed you that the connection to the pith, each branch has a connection to the pith, all these branches are actually arising from the same spot. So they will all make very weak connection. Another thing to make it worse is that I have seen that these limbs, when they start bearing heavy crop, they will start getting pushed down a little bit, every single one of them. And when they start getting pulled a little bit down with the heavy crop load, there are cracks that develop in the crotch area. And that makes a perfect scenario for the water to be trapped. Water from the rains or sprinkler irrigation, it actually stays in there, goes inside the cracks, which expose the soft tissue. And then there is fungal infection, aerial Phytophthora, Botrytis, Ceratocystis, all those fungi, they attack that area, and the fungus spreads up and down the tree. I have seen the trees as young as 5 years old that had so many severe infections of these fungi because of this kind of training that the farmer had to remove them in 50 year. So here is from the top, the branches spaced, horizontally to all sides, and make sure one of the branch is, in this case, we select one strong branch to the northwest where the prevailing wind is from. In your location, if the prevailing wind is from one particular side, make sure you cover that side with a strong branch. If the wind comes from all sides, then you need to have a balanced tree in all directions. So again, we don't select the branches in the same plane because that will crowd one side of the canopy and leave a lot of space on the other. So ideally, the angle of branch attachment to the trunk should be close to 45 degrees so that, they are strong and they can carry their own weight. Okay. This angle of the limb is too narrow. The other limb on this side is too flat. So both narrow and flat, they're not desirable. Okay. Let's go to the long, short, or intermediate pruning. And this is, I talked briefly about this, making different cuts to have different response of the tree, but also to look into the future to have a different shape of the tree for the longer term. Excuse me. So on the left side, we have the unpruned tree. This is a tree that is growing on its natural habit. We have a lot of primaries here, and then the secondaries growing from the primaries. So now, excuse me. Let me drink some water. Sorry. Okay, so now from this unpruned tree, we want to develop the shape of the tree. Okay, so in this case, we kept 3 major scaffolds. If you look at these, we have 3. So we removed this branch, we removed this branch, okay, and then we removed this as well. And then this is the lowest one. We also removed this, okay. So we kept this, and we kept this and this. So we kept 3 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we removed 5 branches that were arising from the main trunk. So that is thinning. So once we thinned the tree, we have this kind of framework, okay? So once we get this kind of framework, now we have to take care of these branches growing from the main trunk, the primary branches and the secondary branches, okay? So the long pruning is that we typically, don't head the primaries, okay? And we just leave the primaries as they are, okay? And then the secondaries, we tip them or head them. Sometimes in long pruning, we just had the tip of those just 1 or 2 inches, okay? But the idea is that we keep these primary limbs growing tall and strong on their own. And we typically promote a natural growth habit in case of long pruning, okay? That is done to actually get a lot more production in the early years, okay? So in these, the trees grow vigorously because we have not touched the tree heavily. We did not head back the primaries to short primary limbs. So these are long. So there is a lot of fruitwood that we retain. So this would need tying the tree in the second year, almost always. Okay. Because now we have kept these trees and it will take a little long time to firm up, but they will have a lot of fruitwood early on that would produce the fruits. Okay. And then the second one that I wanted to explain is the short pruned. Short pruned means that we basically cut the primaries back to a short length. The goal here is to firm these up. How we firm these up? We have seen that when you make a heading cut, there is a lot of sprouting on the sides. Okay, so that wastes energy of the tree into producing too many small thin shoots. So short pruning is always followed up by selective thinning of the secondary branches. So selective thinning of the secondary branches basically invigorates the framework. So short pruning is done in the locations where you have high winds. So you want a firmer, thicker structure, and then you select the secondaries from there and develop the framework. In a windy scenario, and particularly in case of upright growing trees, long pruning is not recommended because your tree is growing upright and you are not pruning them back, heading them back. So the tree is going to make a tall, long structure that is going to have weaker, thinner limbs. And that could actually have a limb breakage in the winds. A good compromise between short pruning and long pruning, which is mostly done here in California, is intermediate pruning. So intermediate pruning is we don't head the primaries back really short. But we do head them back a few inches so that we only remove those tips of those primary branches that have concentrated a number of lateral buds. So we don't have too much lateral growth. So we cut those that growth in the tips off. So, and then we do our first scaffold of the primaries, just like the others, but we head them back in the middle. In this case, the trees are in between in terms of getting good crop early on, but also making a stronger tree that will make stronger scaffolds for the longer orchard life. Okay, so just to go over these, I have written these on these slides. In long prunings, we make no major heading cuts, keep long primary branches, keep small lateral branches for providing leaves and early fruiting wood. It keeps the natural growth habit of the tree. Canopy grows spreading. They will need rope or tying in the second year. Limbs may break with heavy crop or vigorous varieties and with the high wind scenarios. But the major benefit is you have heavy early bearing. There are a lot of growers that consider that still a good option because they say that the expense of tying or the limb breakage in the later years or those kind of issues, they are not as important as having heavy bearing during the early years, and they get a lot of good compensation return on their investment early on. So that basically overpowers everything. So, but you have to be really, skillful in order to do that. Otherwise, your tree can get really out of shape because there are so many different variables into this. So you are not controlling the tree growth in a precise manner here. So you need to be careful about your site conditions, your soil type, your rootstock, your variety, the growth habit of your variety, all of those to make a decision if you need to go with long pruning. As far as the Georgian conditions are concerned, what I have seen in orchards in Georgia, I would not recommend long pruning. So I would recommend some degree of intermediate pruning, or maybe even short pruning in some cases. Because once you do short pruning, I have seen that in a couple of examples in Georgia. Even if you do short pruning in the first year and then get the secondary branches, and then from there on, just keep on doing some annual thinning to open up the canopy, that will still develop a stronger framework for the tree in the local conditions that you have. Short pruning is heading back the primary branches to 18 to 24 inches. It's done in the areas with strong winds, as the trees are short and compact in the second year. It stimulates vigorous secondary growth that need to be removed by thinning. So in case of short pruning, you have a lot of lateral response that you have to come back and thin. If not, then you can actually easily create a lot of shading in the inner canopy in the year 3 or 4. And that could actually, again, a lot of wood that you produce in the first year and the second year, it can give you fruits, but it will not be a longer term deal for the orchard. So that is the reason the short pruned orchards, they have to have their inner canopy areas cleared and opened up. So the production is delayed, or the tree catches up on production slowly, but the trees live longer and they stay productive longer because they will have a lot more light in the canopy, and they will have a stronger framework and the lower side of the canopy. There will be less chance of fungal diseases, infections in short or intermediate pruning. So intermediate pruning is a compromise between long and short pruning. Heading cuts are made at around 42 to 48 inches from the trunk, just below the closely spaced buds in the last 6 to 12 inches of shoot. Sometimes that is important to remove to reduce the rank lateral growth. This reduces the broom type lateral growth, when there is a heavy lateral growth on the top of a branch, it can be top heavy and it can bend or break in the windy scenarios. Okay. It also gives fewer water sprouts, and in vigorous varieties, intermediate pruning may also require tying or roping in the second year. So typically in California, when we are talking about the open center, the trees are cut back at about 30 to 36 inches at planting. Okay, so the height of the head, we had a good discussion when I was in Georgia about the height of the head. We have to have enough room between the ground and the lowest primary branch, enough room for the shaker head to attach, but we don't want to have more than that. So particularly in a heavy wind scenario, we want to have the height of the head just enough so that we can have 2 or 3 good branches down below and we have enough space for the shaker head to attach, but that will actually give us a stronger framework, a shorter tree closer to the ground, which is resilient in the high winds. So heading back at planting is really important, unless you are growing a totally modified central leader tree, which is a different scenario. Okay, so at the time of planting, you cut to 1 meter height. That is typical. That will give you enough room for the shaker head. If suitable side branches are present, if suitable side branches are present, they can be retained. But if they're too weak or in the wrong position, they should be removed. Okay. The following season, the plant will grow like this. You will have some lateral branches, and from there on, you can actually select these primaries. So these are open center trees. Again, this picture is from peaches, but I will have some almond pictures as well. Okay. So during the first year, again, to go back to the overall concepts of training. Nursery grown rootstocks approximately 1 year old. They're planted from late spring to early summer. They should be headed at about 1 meter from the ground. And the plant should be immediately staked and irrigated. During the first dormant season, the first dormant pruning is really critical in defining the shape. We select, 3 to 5 permanent primary scaffold. Every situation, it varies somewhere between 3 to 5, or sometimes 4. So again, to make this point, smaller number of scaffold branches is better than a large number of scaffold branches. Okay, so that is the concept that we follow here in California. Once you determine those primary scaffolds, you will remove all other limbs that originate from the trunk, and all growth grow the lowest primary limb. Then you can use, from there on, you can use one of these methods: long pruning, short pruning, or intermediate pruning. So let's go in the second year. The second year, the trees will typically have several growing laterals. They become secondary scaffolds. 2 each should be selected per primary limb, at least 2. A secondary scaffold is a vigorous upright lateral that forms a Y off of a primary limb. We have seen that in the pictures. And after that, you remove all but 2 of those secondary lateral branches. These, again, just like the primary ones from the trunk, the secondary branches should be evenly spaced around on the primary branches as well. In the same way, when they're growing upwards and outwards, that is how the framework is built, upwards and outwards. They do not need to be headed unless they are excessively long in the second dormant season. And then in the second dormant season, you will also have the tertiary ones. Okay. So during the second year as well, you do some thinning to the inner side of the canopy. If there are crisscrossing branches, if there are branches growing parallel to each other and filling the inner side of the canopy. However, I always tell the growers that don't remove all of them in the middle of the canopy. You need to select some of them, but there are some branches growing to the inner side of the canopy, filling the inside of the canopy. You have to select, keep so many of them on the tree, because that is your early fruit wood. Okay. But at the same time, make sure that there is not excessive growth inside that could actually cause shading in the subsequent years. Okay. So just keep a good number of branches growing within the inside of the canopy to fill the inner side of the canopy, but spaced out really well so that they receive good amount of light to keep producing the fruit. So that was the training during the first couple of years. Once you have selected the framework, once you have selected your primary scaffolds, your secondary scaffolds, and done some thinning cuts, done some heading cuts, and you have developed the framework, then from year 4 onwards, we typically do only maintenance pruning. Okay. The almond trees do not need vigorous annual pruning like we do in peaches. And that is really, really important. I have seen some growers make this mistake. They hire the pruning crews that are trained to prune the peaches, and they, even during the first couple of years, or and they severely prune the trees back, and the mature almond trees, even 4-year, 5-year-old trees, they don't need to be pruned back hard, because in case of almonds, you are the major difference between the almonds and peaches is the peaches bear fruit on the previous year's growth. So every year you have to renew the fruit wood, and the peaches produce buds and they bear fruit. In case of almonds, the almonds can bear on lateral buds as well as the almonds bear on the spurs. So in case of almonds, you have to keep a lot of spurs, and the spurs, they take a couple of years to mature and start producing fruit. So they are perennial shoots, or perennial short shoots. So you have to have a good number of spurs on the tree to have fruit wood. Okay, so that's the reason you don't prune annually, vigorously. Pruning the almond trees is not recommended. So what are the reasons that you would prune a mature almond tree? If there are huge almond trees, old almond trees that you want to invigorate, and you want to renew their fruit wood, because sometimes when the trees get too old, the crop moves up higher in the canopy. The inner canopy down below is shaded with a lot of growth. So you want to invigorate the canopy. You want to produce newer wood that would eventually become fruit wood. So that would be the reason to prune the mature almond trees. So in that case, when you do that, you are not going to have a good crop next year if you are pruning severely to invigorate the canopy and renew the fruit wood. It would take at least 2 years to produce a good amount of fruit in response to your pruning. Another good reason to prune a mature almond tree would be to manage light distribution. That would be a part of annual maintenance pruning. So annual maintenance pruning means, you look into the canopy, lower parts of the canopy. If they are shaded, then you need to open the canopy up a little. Remember, the spurs, the life of the spur is directly proportional to the amount of light it receives. So if one spur is under the shade all the time, it will finally eventually go unproductive and die. So you have to keep the light distribution in the canopy managed properly. Sometimes the almond trees, some almond cultivars also go to alternate bearing cycles. That is because of some genetic characteristics, but also because of the bearing characteristics. If your trees start producing a lot of fruit wood and have a lot of carbohydrate balance in 1 year based on your nutrient and water cycles, then the following year, because of the heavy bearing, your annual vegetative growth is affected. So the trees can actually start getting into the alternate bearing cycles where they will have heavy crop in 1 year and a low crop in next year. Alternate bearing cycles in almonds are a little different than the other crops like pistachios or even citrus, because almond spurs are alternate bearing themselves. So the almonds are mostly alternate bearing on a spur to spur basis. So every year, just a small percentage of the total number of spurs bears fruit. So that means the spurs are alternate bearing. So on a whole tree basis, on a whole canopy basis, that does not affect year to year cropping cycle or cropping variation. Okay. However, it all depends on your the number of healthy spurs that you are maintaining and the light distribution for those spurs. So if you have alternate bearing cycles in your almonds, you can actually cut back some of the growth to bring out fresh fruit wood that will smoothen out the alternate bearing cycles. Another reason could be to control the tree size. If you are growing a vigorous variety on a vigorous rootstock in a really good soil, then you may want to control your tree size, and you want to, maintain a manageable structure so that you can actually, shake them in a efficient manner. Sometimes the trees are so big that you want to do scaffold shaking. So a couple of different, methods or a couple of different reasons to control the tree size. To control the tree size early on, you can do summer pruning. Summer pruning during the summer months, there are active leaves on the tree. And if you do pruning at that time, it is going to make the tree, less vigorous, or it would help control the tree size. So this is a modified central leader, or you can call it a central leader tree, where we did not make a heading cut at planting at 1 meter. So there is a central leader growing all the way up, and you made a cut up there. So you modified this central leader and you encouraged some lateral growth on all sides. So this is basically the central leader or the modified central leader trees. We have some information from the walnut trial where they had the unheaded and versus the modified central leader. In this case, on the left, they did not had these trees at all. They were growing in their natural shape. And in this case, they modified the central leader up here, and then they kept the lateral branches. Okay. As expected, the unheaded trees started bearing early. Like I mentioned, in the long pruning, in minimal heading in almond trees early on, we can get bearing started early. Okay. However, the cumulative yield was similar. Okay. But the unheaded trees had less pruning expense. So the long-term effects of this pruning strategy are still awaited because the research project is still going on. But overall, in the early years, up to year 5 or 6, the cumulative yield was similar in both the cases. So this is how you prune the tree to be a central leader tree form. You keep the tree unpruned, especially the central trunk. You keep it unpruned up to a certain height, and then you make a heading cut up way above. And then you select some of the primaries rising from the main trunk by carefully thinning some of the branches and then heading some other branches. So you take this kind of framework, okay? There's about 40 inches spacing between the levels of branches, and you keep about 20 centimeters of branches after the first year. And those branches will actually produce the secondaries on the side, whereas the tree will also have some growth at the top where you made the heading cut. Sometimes in the central leader tree form, I have seen personally in one of my trials, if you cut this from the top, the trees can become top heavy. So you might have to come back a couple of times in the season to remove, thin out some of the branches from the top. Okay. So formative pruning in first 3 years to establish central leader tree form. So again, you have this trunk, you have this new growth, cut back to 20 centimeters, like mentioned in the previous slide, to an outward facing bud. So this is important because we're actually trying to push the canopy outwards, right? Then in the second year, from this bud, you have this growth. This bud in this depiction, this is the scenario that in this depiction they made, that the top bud here is growing. There will be a lot of growth down below. You can either thin out that growth or remove completely all the growths, or you can actually keep some of them and thin some of the branches. But the main point is to actually get one major, at least one major from the side here. And then do the same thing, cut it halfway towards an outside facing bud, and then you grow the tertiaries from that outside facing bud. And that way you will develop the framework upwards and outwards. In this way, you will still be able to manage the closely spaced trees in a relatively higher density and generate some canopy framework. When to prune? For pruning to have its desired invigorating effect in almonds, it should be done in the dormant season, because in the dormant season, we do the pruning, and then in spring, the shoots, the buds start growing, and it has invigorating effect. If you are doing the summer pruning, it is the opposite. It has the dwarfing effect, because now the tree has pushed all that growth, utilized the water and nutrients to make that growth. And then you're coming in the summer and pruning all that growth. So that will actually shock the tree, take a lot of photosynthesizing leaves from the tree. So that will actually have a dwarfing effect. So sometimes when you are interested in controlling the tree size, you can do summer pruning. But as a general rule of thumb, the the general pruning or general training is done in the dormant season. So in case of almonds, you can also do mechanical pruning, especially mechanical heading. This is mostly done in the older trees to rejuvenate those trees and bring new fruit wood. There's a mechanical pruning or hedging done from the side, again, to open up the canopies or to rejuvenate some of the fruit wood. So the summarizing all of that, the 10 basics of how and when to prune a tree. Prune the trees when the leaves are off. It's easier to see what you're doing. And removal of the dormant buds invigorates the remaining buds. Summer pruning removes the leaves that will slow the, so that is basically the fruit ripening or fruit burn, sunburn is more applicable to the tree fruits, but the summer pruning will remove a lot of leaves that are going to manufacture the food. So it's going to have a dwarfing effect. Okay. So if you are trying to slow down the tree growth or want to have a smaller tree, you can do summer pruning. Right after planting the new tree, so depending on your objective, depending on how much height you need to have for the shaker to attach, cut it off. Typically in California, we do it at 1 meter. Young trees are pruned heavily because we need to encourage their growth. So when deciding which branch to cut and where to cut, remember that topping a vertical branch encourages vegetative growth necessary for development of the tree and opens the tree to more sunlight. Topping the horizontal branch is done to renew fruiting wood and to thin off excessive fruit. Horizontal branches left uncut will bear earlier and heavier crops. Upright branches generally remain vegetative and vigorous. So when you make a heading cut, there will be new growth that occurs within a certain distance of that bud. So sometimes you may need to come back and remove those branches. So you don't want to leave large stubs. So you need to make clean cuts. Don't cut too close to the limb, but don't leave big stubs. So sometimes you need to use a tie down, or you need to spread the branches to actually space them out to get 45 degrees angles. If you have upright, vigorous growing trees, if you have narrow angles. The first year selection of primary scaffolds vertically spaced and in right directions is really critical. That is the end of my presentation. I think we can have discussion now, and then we can go back to the other questions as well. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have a few questions, and they are all about. First of all, thank you for the interesting lecture. And the first question is about the angle of the cut. Which is the best angle to use the special scissors to cut it with the scissors?
Oh, the angle of the cut. So basically, we just do it at a slanting cut. Usually around 45 degrees.
Yes. So the cut must be pointing up or down, because as we said, the water may go inside, and it can the fungi infection and things like that. Yeah.
Right. So if you are, for example, if you are cutting a small branch, tender branch, and there's a bud facing outwards, then you will actually cut it downwards to the other side so that the water, when there's water, it drains away from the bud. So you would make a cut that is basically higher towards the bud and slanting towards the other side.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Any more questions?
May I? I have a question.
Yes, please.
I have a question. This canopy inside that we should remove, how many should they be in percentage? This canopy inside, and on the 4th year, when we only have the maintenance pruning, could these inside branches be removed? Thank you.
Okay, so the first question is about the inner side of the canopy. How much percentage should we remove, right? Okay, yeah. Now it depends a lot on, every tree is different. When I pruned some of the trees in December this year. So when you walk around the tree, every tree is different. So the goal is to not remove heavily from the inner side of the canopy. In a typical scenario, I think, based on my trees that I pruned here on my university campus, I was removing, about 40%, less than half of the branches that we had in the inner canopy. Okay. So basically I was just keeping a little more number of branches on the tree than I was removing. And that is because I only removed those branches that were crisscrossing with each other, or that was in the same plane, like up and down. So I just kept one of those branches. But if they were not interfering with one another, if they were just growing, and those branches were, by the end of the 1st year, they had a lot of buds on them. So I decided to keep them for the fruit wood that will give me early fruit. Second question was when you're doing maintenance pruning in year 4 and beyond, what did you mean by outside branches?
Well, simply inside branches that we have in the inside canopy, do we need to intervene intensively? But I got the answer in the first question. Thank you.
Yes. So yeah, in the year 4 and later, again, every year when we train our pruning crews, we look for the inner canopy and outside, wherever there are crisscrossing branches and branches parallel to each other. Yes, we thin them out.
Thank you so much. I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Is there any dependence, and I guess there is, on the distance between the trees and the type of pruning? If there is, could you please elaborate on this?
Okay, distance between the trees, I have experience between the conventional, like fully conventional planting, where you have 4.5 meters spacing between the trees and 6.5 between the rows, versus closed spacing, like a high density system where you have only 2 or 2.5 excuse me, 2 or 2.5 meters between the trees. So if you're planting your trees really closely, like 2 meters or 2.5 meters, then it's important to have a tree growing up like spindle shaped tree, right? The Christmas tree shaped tree. So if you're planting the trees closely, then obviously you don't want your trees to grow into each other when they grow big. So in that case, I would experiment with, or I would do the modified central leader, where you have more space for the laterals to grow in the upper canopy as well, so that you can have higher amount of fruit wood on the tree and still avoid the trees from growing sideways into each other. Okay. In the conventional trees, because we have a lot more space between the trees, so we actually push the canopy to go outwards as well. Now, let me just point out one thing here. I observed some of the scenarios in Georgia where we had very spreading varieties. So, for example, one of your important varieties is really spreading, and the branches get drooping if they spread outwards. So that also runs the risk of limb breakage or poor tree growth. So in that case, you can you can avoid number one, you can avoid letting the trees grow by itself. Like you can do short pruning to create the framework of the tree, and then direct where your growth is growing, so as you don't push the tree outwards. In spreading varieties, in the cultivars that grow in a spreading habit, I would not do like long pruning or natural growth habit. I would intervene and give the tree its shape by carefully selecting the direction of the buds and the way I'm pushing the growth.
Thank you. And also I have a question. Maybe you talked about this. Why don't we can combine some of the pruning methods? For example, first you are to prune shortly, and then shortly for shaping the trees, and then intermediately or other.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I would basically, yeah, that's was exactly if you do short pruning, that doesn't mean that every year you are selecting the first the primaries you're selecting at like 18 inches, for example, right? That doesn't mean that in the second year then you again select the secondaries at 18 inches. No. Short pruning is basically used to develop a stronger framework at the head. The head of the tree that has 3 or 4 scaffolds arising from it, to make that portion stronger. And if you have secondaries arising from there, and you can just let them grow and then just maybe tip them slightly, not had them too short, that will give you a good framework, but make sure that you come in every year and do a lot of thinning. Because if you do those, if you keep the secondaries as longer shoots, you have a lot more growth in between, in the inner side of the canopy. And because you are not keeping the short secondaries and tertiaries, you would need to actually thin some of the growth. Otherwise, you can create some long shoots clustered in a smaller space, and you will have issues later on with shading. But yes, you can do short pruning in the first year to firm up the branches to have a stronger framework, but then let the secondaries grow and do just minimal heading.
Thank you.
May I? May I?
Yes, please.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that it's not always intensive pruning required in the following years. Is there any phase or how mature should a tree be not to involve pruning at all?
Can you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that pruning, intensive pruning is not always required. I have a question. Is pruning not required at any point in maturity? Is there any age of almond trees when pruning is no longer required?
Okay, so when you talk about pruning, there could be some years in between, I would say, where you can actually get by without pruning the trees. However, every year you have to make an assessment about the water sprouts, for example. The water sprouts, the suckers, they are the vegetative, green, plump, water-filled branches that basically draw a lot of water and nutrients in the canopy. So annually you have to remove those. You also have to be mindful of any crisscrossing branches that actually interfere with one another. Sometimes you have those and they interfere with one another and they don't shake well. The third one is the dead branches. If you have dead branches, that comes later on when your trees get old. So those are the things that you just make sure that you remove. Other than that, I have seen some scenarios where you just walk around the trees and you can decide that, okay, my trees look okay. I don't want to prune every single tree. Just have my crew walk down the rows. And if you see any water sprouts or crisscrossing branches, just remove them. Otherwise, the trees are fine. During the middle years, that's pretty common. But the younger trees and then the older trees, as the trees get older, then you have a lot more issues going on. Then you may want to do some pruning. Yeah.
Understood, thank you. On green pruning, the so-called summer pruning, what can you say? Is it recommended at all? What are the advantages and disadvantages of green pruning, i.e. summer pruning?
Okay, so the first thing about summer pruning is sometimes people, even in the first year, sometimes people do pre-selection. I have seen people doing pre-selection. What that means is when I talked about scaffold selection, I talked about the end of first year when the trees are shedding the leaves and the dormant season is there. After the first season is over, then you can see the framework, you can see all the branches, and you can make decisions. However, some people actually even during the first year, they will actually go in, if they have extra labor on hand, they will just go in and thin out some of the branches. So that is called pre-selection. And that pre-selection people do because that, because it's first year, there is a lot of growth going on in the tree. So once you make that selection, then what you do essentially is your trees take a hit back on carbohydrate balance because they are generating less energy. But then there are fewer branches to channelize that energy to. So the remaining branches, it makes it easier in the dormant season to select vigorous branches because the remaining branches are started thickening out in the remaining of the season. So that is, I mean, I would not recommend that in every scenario. Generally, the summer pruning, if you are, pruning in the summer and, pruning a lot of wood, green wood, that is going to set back the tree a little bit. So I have done summer pruning in certain cases. For example, if I have made my heading cuts in the dormant season, and those heading cuts are giving rise to a lot of lateral growth, and I see the brooms, becoming clear at the end of every branch. There is like a cluster of smaller branches. I don't want to wait all the way until December to thin them out. So in-season thinning can still be done based on the growth response of the tree. So I hope that helps.
Well, almost. Let me specify more. Why I ask this question about green pruning, i.e. summer pruning. I do summer pruning myself, but very lightly, because I want to have a central leader. I want to have more air flowing in towards open center, and I need less spraying. Am I doing it well?
Yeah, when I mentioned that I did summer pruning in my trees, I did the summer pruning on the central leader trees. And that is because in case of central leader trees, on the top of the branches, because we were doing minimal pruning and we did not head them much in the winter time, so we did minimal thinning. So yes, some degree of thinning, particularly in the central leader trees, that may be required in the summer, and that will actually open up the canopy and direct your photoassimilates or carbohydrates to the other growth.
Well, yes, but when we talk about central leader, these are for intensive orchards, right?
The central leaders, yeah, central leader trees are usually planted relatively close.
I don't think there are many orchards like this, like not many intensive. We have more different type of orchards in Georgia. So therefore, we rather prefer to talk about conventional orchards. What can you say about conventional orchards?
In case of conventional orchards, in terms of summer pruning, the only scenarios I would go with summer pruning is if your tree is having a lot more lateral growth response that is creating a lot of crowding in the canopy. So I may, during the first couple of years, I may want to do one additional pass in the summer to do some light thinning that to basically keep the canopy opened up. But if in the traditional way, if we are actually doing the pruning the way we did it, the way that I explained, selecting the framework in the first and second year, the primaries and secondaries, then you might not need to that extra pass. At least here in California, that extra pass in the summer is not justified labor-wise. So we just let the trees grow.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. I have another question. Now, this is the height of the prime branch. In California, mechanization is different for pruning or for harvest. And in Europe, there is another machinery for crop collection, harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
We are mainly focusing on European machinery, closely planted from each other. I guess we will be using the machinery that is manufactured in Europe for picking the yield. Therefore, I wonder whether you have experience in this. Did you deal with the height for this European manufactured crop collection, for instance, umbrella shakers?
Oh, sorry, talking about the tree height?
That's right.
Yeah.
The first branch above the surface of the ground.
Okay. So I have not worked with those machines yet. We have one trial that we planted last year. It's a high density trial. And we actually hope to get that harvested with the newer machines on the umbrella type harvesters. But that is going to be in 2 years from now. So yeah, I have not used those machines, and I'm not sure about the height of the. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have one question myself.
Excuse me. Yes, please.
Well, in the dormant season, it's over, almost over. I was planning to prune to form the shape. Last spring, it was when we planted the trees. Is it late already, or is it possible still to prune them?
So you said that this is still dormant season, and last season you planted late, but you're talking about right now, right?
Yeah. That's
okay.
Right.
Yeah. So right now, I mean, we just we are some of the orchards. This is the first week of February, so we just finished pruning our orchards last week. 2-3 weeks before bloom. So your trees are still dormant. So you are still you have time to prune now.
Understood. Thank you. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Good morning. I wonder what should be the height of the base below the first branch. Where shall we start branching out? 90 centimeters, 1 meter, or what is the standard? What should be maintained and kept? Thank you.
So, yeah, typically we head at 36 inches, which is 1 meter. And the first branch would be a few centimeters below that. So yeah, I mean, 90 centimeters, maybe, let me see, convert it. Let me convert it. 70 centimeters. Okay. Yeah, about 30 inches would be minimum to the first height. So basically that is about 75 to 80 centimeters. That would be about 80 centimeters would be the minimum that you have to have the clearance, that I would call the clearance. So you had it to 1 meter, and then you have about 20 centimeters below that, where you select your branches. So yeah, about from that area.
At least 80 centimeters, and maximum, what is the maximum? And what is the optimum? And which one is better?
Yeah, so the maximum, I mean, I wouldn't think about the maximum in that sense, because you want to have your tree as close to the ground as possible, right? Even if you are doing the central leader, if you have a lot more lateral branches, you will still want to start your primary limb, the first primary limb, right above the point where your shaker head is going to attach. Okay. So if you leave, let's say if you leave 150 centimeters of clean, okay, which you do not require, look at what will happen if you bring the shaker and shake that trunk, and all your crop load is up, all your branch load is up higher. So that is going to have a poor shaker motion transfer to shake your trees, for example, in the first place. Secondly, it would require a lot more strength of shaking, which can bark your trees, which can damage the bark. And also, when you leave higher height of head, you run the risk of creating a weaker trunk that would be prone to breakage in winds. So the optimum is, I would say in centimeters, I would say anywhere between, around 1 meter to maybe 1.2 maximum. That should be depending on the type of growth that you're getting on the sites. That should be the optimum. I would not go longer than that because eventually it's still mechanical shaking and there is engineering involved. So the shape of tree has to be such that it transfers the motion of the shaking through the canopy in a really good manner.
On the height of the central, the branch without branches, the higher the first branch is, I subjectively believe the less yield will have. Is that right?
Okay. I mean, you could correlate that to yield in so many different ways. For example, because now you're managing the tree height in a different way. So what I believe is you would have more stronger limbs and the canopy closer to the ground if you have the first branch at the optimum height and not have it up higher. I can see a lot of issues in terms of limb breakage, in terms of the strength of the trunk. And then unless you are doing the central leader in the conventional system, if you're still heading it, that will actually, in my opinion, it will promote a weaker tree.
Thank you, understood. I do apologize, I have a question.
Yes.
Whether 5 or 6 years, is it justified to prune when the variety is not good?
When what is not good?
When the variety does not serve to the purpose, when the orchard is 5 or 6 years, shall we change it altogether or shall we prune it still?
Okay, so you mean the variety?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right. Oh. If it's sour, if it's a different taste.
Okay, so you know, I mean, you can. So if the variety is not desirable, okay, and that leads you to the issues of you know, marketing issues, and then, I mean, I have not top worked in almond trees. Like top working means you know, putting in another variety on top of that, heading the trees all the way back, and then top working. I have not done with the almond trees, so I don't want to suggest to you doing that, like top working. But I don't know. I mean, if the pruning can you know, if you can do severe pruning and, you know, push the fruitwort, I don't know what factors you would have. There could be a lot of factors, you know, genetic factors particularly. You know, if you are and in terms of rootstock as well, what the rootstock is, there are genetic factors, what the variety is. So all I can say at this time is, you know, you can, you know, severely prune and try to rejuvenate the tree, but I cannot say.
Let me specify. Variety may not be a problem, but the nursery is. My friend in his orchard has a sour almond. That's why I'm asking. That's the condition he got. 5-6 years orchard.
Yeah, so I think that could be genetic. So I don't think that you know, could be improved by pruning. I mean, that's my thought on this. Yeah, that could be a plant material problem coming from the nursery, the rootstock / variety combination. So, you know,
I think he meant not pruning, but grafting.
Yeah, right. So the grafting, the way the almond tree is developed, you know, we developed it in the nursery in the first year where we bud it. So I have not done budding on a field planted grown almond tree. So I don't have any experience. In pistachios, I can tell you that, okay, if the bud doesn't take, you know, you can go back and bud the tree again. In peaches, yes. If in peaches, we do it all the time. If we have a 30-year-old tree and that variety is no longer desirable, we want to put a new variety, we can do top working through grafting. We do it all the time. In almonds, I have not seen anyone done.
That's I was confused by the term. Thank you for correcting.
Okay, yeah, and in almonds I have not done top working because in almonds we don't do grafting. We develop the trees by budding early on. Yeah, so I don't have experience in experimenting that with the almond trees, and I'm not sure if the trees will respond to that. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. when the orchard is fully yielding, when it's reaching maximum level, distance between the plants, I've seen it on YouTube, when large trees have a distance, when branches conflict with each other, what should be the minimum distance, 2 meters, 3 meters between them when they are at their maximum. And in majority of cases, they are touching each other. Should we intervene? Should we prune?
Yes, when the trees start touching each other, growing into each other, eventually then they will have shading effect on each other. Okay, so that wood will become unproductive. So, so yeah, I mean, in meters, I would, so meter is like 3 feet. Yeah, a little over a meter, I would say I would maintain a distance of 2 meters. If you can maintain 2 meters distance, it's like 6 feet, that's great. But the larger trees, I have seen them growing as long as they are 3 to 4 feet, the canopies 3 to 4 feet from each other, you're fine. If they're touching each other, then you may want to hedge them from the side.
Thank you.
Okay, so meanwhile, I'm still I wanted to answer that question about I think I already answered the question about flowering and irrigation. I was just trying to explain the general effect that the response of the trees to drought conditions, they push the flowers. So if you create some moisture in the soil before flowering, it will help. If it will help in delaying the flowering a little bit. There is a question in the chat. I have an off-topic question. I'm curious about yield per hectare in super intensive orchards. Super intensive orchards, I don't have direct experience yet because we are working on 2 trials on high density orchards. So there could be a lot of variations on that. So typically, I can pull up the high density slide from the last discussions that we had. Okay. Let me check. I will show you the results again from Australia trials that we had. 7. Okay, where is that? Okay, here's. Oh, and by the way, I got that formula pulled up that we talked about the other day. And I will pull that up in a minute. Okay, so here is the ultra high density trial. I'm going to show you the same slide that I showed you last week. in this ultra high density trial. Shasta is a vigorous variety here. So the yield per tree for the vigorous varieties, the yield per tons per hectare. This is the second planted in 2018, third year. Okay, so this is the third year trees. The third year trees we have in the high density, we have about 2 tons per hectare in the third year. What does that translate to in pounds per acre? 2 tons is basically 2,000 kilograms, right? Times 2.2, 4,400 pounds per hectare divided by 2.47. So 1,800 pounds per acre. That's really good, but yeah. That's what we are getting in the ultra high density trial in our Loxton, Australia location. All right, you're welcome. Okay, now let me pull the other one that I wanted to show you. Okay, so this is, I think I had a question about this formula that I did, the constant factor, right? Okay, so in here, you know, I agree with you that it could be confusing that we somehow did not talk about factoring in the efficiency, okay? However, when we used the example, when we plugged in the numbers for ET, we used 0.38, whatever we worked out after considering the efficiency, right? So basically ETC corrected for efficiency. So when we worked this out, the ETC, we worked at 0.38 inches. Remember we did this for here. Yeah.
I believe few slides are missing because I don't think we have this one in our
Yes, right. So because this is the calculation that this is a slide that I added based on our discussions on the first days. This is a slide that I actually brought back in, I think the second or the third day. So I made those calculations over there. However, I mean, this number for the ET in this formula, right? So tree spacing times crop ET times 25.38. So the crop ET that you plug in, that is basically your ET corrected for efficiency after that. Because this factor 25.38 does not account for that. It only accounts for converting your tree spacing to your you know, overall orchard tree number and the liters of water in inches.
Yeah, I didn't understand before what the 25, like this number was, because I didn't know that it was a constant factor. So this number changes.
Yeah, so because, you know, remember your ET, if you are getting your ET, reference ET, I checked the weather stations. Your ET is also typically in inches per day, right? So if you have your ET in inches, then you have this factor, because it eventually, see, it gives you tree water use in liters per tree per day. Okay, so this factor is after doing all the calculations of how many liters are there in 1 inch, right? And then how many trees are in 1 acre or one hectare actually, based on tree spacing. So all of that incorporated into the calculations, I developed this constant factor. So this is a factor that I tried a couple of times, but because we have a different factor here in California, a constant, different constant, because our constant is based on converting these inches to gallons, and then the tree spacing in feet, right? So our constant is different. So the only thing that I did here is to change that constant to this by changing, introducing liters and meter squares. So as long as you use the corrected ET that you got after plugging in the efficiency, you should get the tree water use. Or you can do the other way around. You can just use the evapotranspiration, crop evapotranspiration, just the basic based on the ETO, and get the tree water use here. And now you have this number. You can always incorporate the efficiency factor now, because you have to apply that efficiency factor before you decide to irrigate. So does it make sense? So
yes, understood.
Yeah, the efficiency factor is the efficiency factor where you actually decide how much water you need to apply rather than how much water your crop is just needing. Yeah, so it's up to you. But this factor 25.38, I calculated this a couple of times. This should take care of, as long as you have in inches per day here and the tree spacing in meter square, these two, then this factor would apply. I have another factor that is 0.623. I can tell you when you have this in feet square and then inches per day. So this factor changes to 0.623, and the answer that will give you in gallons per tree per day. So is that clear, or does it make sense?
Yes, it's clear.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for the question. So we clarified it.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
This 25.38 is inch per millimeters, right? And we end up having 232 liters per day. This is a very high indicator. I can't think of any water supply system that could handle it. Should I adjust this system? I can't get to this much.
Okay, so let's see. So 232 liters per tree per day, right? So you're commenting on that, right?
That's right.
Okay.
When the orchard is 6 to 4, I'll need more, right?
So
my trees will need more.
So yeah, 6 meter by 4 meter spacing.
I have 6 to 5. I'll need more than 232.
Okay, yeah, 6 to 5. So basically, the farther the trees are, it's generally true that the trees would be larger than the 6'4", right? That's one assumption. So the 6'4",
So is my system useless? Is my irrigation system useless? I get only 20% of that to my trees. I can supply 20% every day of this.
Okay. Right. So let's see, because it depends on your canopy size. This is at 80% canopy light interception. Okay. So assumption here is 80% canopy light interception. Okay. So your trees may be fully mature. Your trees may be planted at 6 meters to 5 meters distance, but it eventually goes, the assumption here is that those trees at full maturity would fill 80% of the orchard floor with their canopies. If that is the case, then yes, then your trees would be needing this amount of water. If you're not supplying this amount of water, then you're applying less water. But I can suspect,
I supply only 20% of that.
But is the canopy light interception around 80%?
When it grows, yes, it's only 3 years. When it's 7 years old, it will have, right?
Yeah. So basically, the canopy light interception is the overall
no systems calculate that much. I plan to have another orchard. It's a lot of water. Even corn is not supplied with this much. Should it be less, much less? No, with the principle, when I was looking, I was planning to ask this question to two different people talking. Well, 1,000 millimeters of water is needed per hectare. So that's the basis of this calculation. 1,000 millimeters of water, no system in Georgia, no company, no utility company in Georgia can supply us this much.
Okay.
700 millimeters according to this formula. No, 9.7 for that orchard in the example. 9.7 megaliters, which is 97,000 tons. Not this much is lost in Georgia. Not this much is evaporated. It's not only evaporation, it's about fertile land and clay land. Does that really not matter? Well, analysis of that, I'm sure nobody has done that in Georgia. We need, Agera Group has done it. I don't know. Is this a huge difference? What's your formula? What is your indicator per day for young trees? According to my soil, 8 liters, and for adults, twice as much, i.e. 16. Per day? Yes, per day. But I don't irrigate every single day. And this one says the different thing.
Yeah, so
because 40 meters, when if I supply that much, I mean the 40 liters, that's the system I have. I wanted to increase that supply. And I have calculated more than you in Sirnare and Bodbe. It's a huge indicator. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. we can't get supply water of this much. So corn, i.e. maize, is given 2,000 millimeters during vegetation. 500, no, 50, 50, 50. No, 200 millimeters during vegetation, four sessions of irrigation. No, 500, 500, yes. 500 tons, this is for the maize or corn. Well, what I can, this system is useless than in Georgia. Aspiration is one of the components of this formula. This is evaporation from the leaf and from the soil. It's 6 point something in Georgia at the peak, i.e. it's 70 tons per hectare per session. It's and then transpiration from the leaf. I have all that together in my formula, and that's how much we get. About 70, different number. Know what's in this 1,000 millimeters. There it's divided or multiplied on transpiration, and it says 232 per day per tree. So it's all based on the slides. Well, fair enough. We have a different number, definitely.
Okay.
I do not calculate anything. What I saw on the slide, I'm just commenting. I can't pellet it. I can't supply that much to my orchard. And the slide says 232 liters per day per tree.
That's an example for the top when you have this much of evapotranspiration. So you will go by the evapotranspiration. So I don't believe that you will have 0.38 inches per day. That's exceptional. That's exceptionally high, even for California. So you would plug in the realistic number for ETC. You don't go with this example, the answer in this example that I have. Change this 0.32 to 0.18.
I guess this is for the sandy soil.
The evapotranspiration, you know, there will be a factor of the evapotranspiration would be affected by the type of the soil. However, when you actually calculate the application, then it matters if you are sandy soil or clay soil, how much frequency you are applying at, right? So when your trees are, using water based on evapotranspiration, then your evapotranspiration numbers would be the key to get that, how many inches per day of ETC you have. Obviously, different regions, different soil types will have variation in that as well. But it's not, so, okay, this number is not the absolute number. This number is based on this much evapotranspiration at 80% canopy light interception, okay? So I picked the example of, I don't know even, because the crop coefficient is another important factor. We used a crop coefficient of 1.15, okay? So it's all a matter of using the correct crop coefficient that applies to you and using the correct evapotranspiration, reference evapotranspiration that you get from your weather station. So then you will come up with your number. This is not, I mean, don't go with 232 liters because this is just an example. I can make it like 0.8 inches per day, and then this will jump to 2000 or something, right? But that's not the point. The point is to illustrate the example on how much evapotranspiration coefficient on a particular month when you have this much of a crop coefficient, the KC value for almonds applied to your site, how much will that give you? So this is a formula, okay? Plus, if you have relatively less than 80% canopy light interception, then you reduce accordingly. And the third-year trees only use 35% of this. Even if I have 30.38 inches per day of ET on that particular day, and my full consumption comes to 232 liters for 80%, and I have 3-year-old trees, it will be only 30 to 35% of that they need. Does that make sense?
Well,
it's all clear, but the previous slide made me think that 9.7 million per hectare, and their number of trees is a factor, and this is irrigated for 3 years, right? Yield, when you were talking about Sashta and the other one, the other variety, you had it underlined.
Okay. The other slide, okay. Yeah, let me.
That slide also refers to that on the actual water spent, the actual.
Yeah, okay, here's the slide, right? Yeah. 9.7 megaliters is basically. Yeah, that's about.
This is 9,700 tons, and this is kiloliter per tree, i.e. this is tons, 18 per tree, when it's 513 trees per.
Okay, is it 9,700?
And when it's 1,100 trees, that's the different number.
So this is basically no, not 9,700 tons. It will be 970 tons. A ton is 1,000 liters, right?
It's 1,000 liters per ton.
1,000.
9 million.
No. 9.7 is 970,000.
Millioniliter. Megaliter.
No. This is megaliter.
Okay.
Megaliter, millioniliter.
It's million then.
Yeah, 1 million liters. That's basically 970,000. It's basically, you can call it 1 million liter. Yeah. And that's
million. Ara, 10 million. 30 million, yeah, 10 million.
It's 10 million.
No, it's 1 million.
10 million.
How come? Plus 6 zeros.
Okay.
You had,
let me
it's 10 million.
To
convert the systems.
Okay, so 1
megaliter, 10 megaliters is 10 milliliters.
Okay, so 10 megaliters is
Titcos 30 megalitri.
Almost. Internet says it's mega is 1,000. Come on, mega is million. kilo is 1,000. That's the reference.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, 10 megaliters. Yeah, I mean, 10 megaliter comes to be 9,800 ton, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. I think there is some, misunderstanding between the megaliters. Basically, megaliters is 1,000.
Ara, kilowatt. Mega ari million.
No, kilo is 1,000. Mega is a million.
Yeah, mega is one.
Million.
Yeah, 1 million. Right. Okay. All right. So 10 megaliter is okay. Oh no, now I got it. Okay. So 10 million. Okay. Right. Okay. So yeah. So megaliter is 1 million. So 9.7 is 10. Yeah, you're right. So 10
megaliter, 1 megaliter is 1,000 cubic meter.
Yeah. So 1 million liters basically. Yeah. So
yeah.
Right.
So
this one is 10 million liters.
Yeah. So let's see, 9.7 divided by 2.47, that is 3.92 megaliters. So basically 4 million liters of, okay. And this divided...
And I have a question on this. Atmospheric, the kind of, is this consisting of rain as well? Does that include rain and irrigation, raindrop and snowdrop, or is it irrigation only?
This one? This one is
that's right. That's number 10 million. Does that include raindrop and snow and others? Whatever comes from the atmosphere?
I think that is the total water use. Yeah, total water use. So that will include that. Yeah. Let me keep on doing my calculation here. 1 million gallons, right? So 1 million gallon is 1 divided by, okay, yeah, it's only 36 inches. Yeah, this is 36 inches of water, only 3 feet of water. So the calculations in California, some calculations use 52 inches of water for the 80% canopy light interception. This is only 36 inches of water. So yeah, and this is what they applied in Australia, and it converts to 36.
So this is raindrop and snow as well. Snow and rain as well.
What I think in this case, this would probably be just the irrigation now, because 36 inches seems to be 36 inches per acre. I will have to check with this researcher, but I guess this is just irrigation, because the contribution in South Australia from other components like rain and snow, I mean, snow would be 0. The rain would be minimal. So this is pretty much the applied irrigation. Yeah, not considering the rain into the factor. But this, yeah, I calculated, this amounts to 36 inches of water. And I know that the crop coefficient is right around those numbers. Even in Georgia, it might be sometimes higher in high windy scenarios. Or so this is not a huge number. This is what is 500 trees per hectare is still a huge number. So if you have smaller number of trees, this is not a huge number in my opinion. It's 36 inches. And 36 inches is on the lower side. Fully grown trees take a lot more than 36 inches. But young trees, you can get away with 36 inches. And we can try calculating on the basis of the megaliters, and it quickly adds up. I have this slide here when we calculated that, and where is that? Yeah, I have this slide that we calculated, and it adds up really quickly. Let me share my slide. Okay, so in the first slide, for example, here, they said it translates to 13 megaliters. So many orchards get away with applying less water, around 10 to 12 megaliters. Okay, 1 acre foot roughly equals 3 megaliters. 1 acre foot, 3 megaliters. So in one day in June or July, where you have an ET of 0.32 inches, that is the peak demand. During the peak demand, in 1 week, the trees will need 0.7 megaliters per week. So almost 1 million liters per week, 3/4 to 1 million. So that is for 80% canopy light interception. Does that number sound really high?
Well, the number is somewhat high for my orchard. I don't want to have the same mistake as I did for the current orchard. This number is too high for me. It's not readily available in Georgia. This much water is not really readily available. I'm not suspecting. I was trying to specify whether this is correct in my case. If this is correct, I will consider it in my future orchard.
Okay, now the thing is, the crop coefficient of 1.15 is with the cover crop, okay? So we need to change that. So probably if this, I don't have it in the calculation mode here, but this will drop to 0.5 probably, yeah. So 1/2 megaliter per week. So this will drop to like 3/4, less than 100,000 liters per hectare. What is that?
500 tons per hectare. That's per week. 1 ton per tree per week.
Okay, so, okay, 500 tons. So no, it's not for 500 trees would be too many for that canopy size. So, okay. So if you're saying 1 ton.
Then higher than that.
Yeah. So that is
I didn't get it.
Let
He's
me
saying.
see. Let me go back. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, let's. Okay. So if it is 500,000 liters, right? Per week.
Yeah.
That means.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So divide it by, let's say, 500 liters. Tree per week.
Number of trees.
Okay. So
500,000 by 500. It's 1,000 liters per week.
Okay. So let's divide it by 500. Okay. 1,000 liters per week and per tree. And then divide by 7. That's 142 liters per tree per day, right? Divided by 3.9. Okay.
Not 400 something.
No,
it's 140. 140.
Right. 140 liters per tree per day, right? Okay. So this comes to 30.
That's right.
37 gallons per tree per day. Okay. I can tell you based on a fully grown trees, and you might have seen the pictures. I can bring you some pictures tomorrow of the fully grown canopies of a mature tree in California with 80% light canopy light interception. The trees can actually use about 72 gallons per tree per day. Now, this calculation that we did only comes to 37 gallons per tree per day, which is close to half of that. So, I don't think this number is high.
I'm not saying it's high. I'm saying apparently that is needed. That's what I should consider in my calculations.
Right. Okay. Now, I would tell you one thing. I would caution you against one thing, because if you are considering in any new plantings, redesigning your irrigation system and working out your higher capacities, please keep in mind all your soil conditions, other environmental conditions, and I would not just go by these numbers and start applying higher water. You need to eventually, the goal is to match the evapotranspiration needs. And based on these calculations, we are seeing that the evapotranspiration needs are really higher in almonds. So yes, you need to consider that as a factor, but there are other factors to consider as well, to take into consideration what your soil type is, and how your trees are spreading your roots in that soil, and how your tree size is increasing. So all those things. But yes, definitely, I would say that the almond trees can have this much of tree water needs on a daily basis. Yeah.
Well, understood. I'll consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion. Yeah. Actually, it took me a while to do back and forth between, because I'm not used to doing in liters and tons, but it's a good exercise. It's a good mental exercise for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Well, I guess we can call it a day today, and tomorrow we'll continue at the usual time on a different topic.
Okay. All right.
See you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you ever so much and goodbye.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.